All right, so you want to do a deep dive on eye infections. You came to the right place. You really want to get to the bottom of this, huh?
You really do seem ready to tackle this. And you got some pretty in-depth articles here, too. It's good stuff.
Definitely. The listener sent over some pretty serial medical journals on this one. Lots of info on all the different types of eye infections.
And it's more than just knowing the different types, right? You want to understand what makes them tick, like what causes them, how to tell if you have one, how to get rid of them, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And don't forget about prevention. Nobody wants to end up with a nasty eye infection if they can avoid it, right?
For sure. Prevention is key. Where should we even begin with this? When I first looked at these articles, I was surprised by just how common eye infections actually are.
Really? I always thought of them as more of an occasional annoyance, like everyone gets pink eye once in a while, but it's not exactly an epidemic, is it?
Well, not exactly an epidemic, but close. We're talking about 1 million cases needing treatment every year. 1 million.
Wow, 1 million! Okay, you've officially got my attention. I guess I've been underestimating the power of those little microbes.
It's easy to do, especially when you think about how small they are. But they can definitely pack a punch. And speaking of those microbes, there's a whole bunch of them that can cause trouble in your eyes.
So it's not just one size fits all when it comes to eye infections. There's a whole variety pack of nasty bugs out there just waiting to set up shop in our eyeballs.
Pretty much. And that's what makes diagnosing them tricky. The symptoms can be pretty similar across the board.
Okay, so let's talk symptoms then. What should we be on the lookout for? If our eyes start acting up, what's the first sign that something might be wrong?
Well, the articles mention the usual suspects, like if you're experiencing redness,
Redness? Okay.
pain, that scratchy, gritty feeling like there's something stuck in your eye. Sensitivity to light is another big one.
Right. That makes sense. But I'm guessing those symptoms aren't exactly unique to one specific eye infection. Like you could have any of those things and it could be a whole bunch of different culprits, right?
You hit the nail on the head. Lots of infections share those common symptoms. So while those signs might tell you something's up, they don't necessarily point to the actual culprit.
It's like a medical mystery. We've got the clues, but we need to play detective to figure out what's really going on. All right, so where do we start with this rogues gallery of eye infections? Give me the rundown of the usual suspects.
Let's start with the one you already mentioned, the most common troublemaker. Conjunctivitis, or as most people know it, pink eye.
Pink eye, ah yes. It sounds almost harmless, though, like a bad fashion choice rather than an infection.
Don't let that fool you. Conjunctivitis can be a real pain, and it's actually quite contagious, especially the viral and bacterial kinds. And those are the most common.
So no sharing eye drops then. Got it. But I'm curious, how can you tell the different types of pink eye apart? They can't all look exactly the same, right?
That's where those subtle differences in symptoms come in. For example, bacterial conjunctivitis often comes with discharge, that sticky, gunky stuff.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
But with allergic conjunctivitis, your eyes will be super itchy.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? It's basically an allergic reaction happening right there in your eye.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So if pink eye is like the common cold of eye infections, what's the equivalent of getting the flu? What's the one that's more likely to really knock you off your feet?
Good question. I'd say that would have to be keratitis.
Keratitis. Okay, I've definitely heard of that one, but honestly, I don't know much about it. What is it exactly?
Well, to put it simply, it's an inflammation of the cornea. But the reason it's such a big deal is because if it's not treated quickly and properly,
Yeah.
it can potentially lead to vision loss, even blindness.
Whoa, blindness. Okay, now you're talking. That definitely changes the game. What on earth causes something that serious?
It can be caused by a bunch of things, but the articles mention a strong link with contact lenses.
Oh, interesting. Contact lenses. So something a lot of us use every day then.
Exactly. Improper cleaning or overwearing your contact lenses can basically turn your eye into a breeding ground for bacteria, and that's when you run into trouble.
Okay, that's a thought I could do without right before I put my contacts in. So what's the deal with bacteria and contact lenses? Is it a particular type that's attracted to that environment?
That's a great question. And it turns out it's not just about any bacteria taking up residence on your lenses. The articles I read mentioned a few usual suspects like Pseudomonas aeruginosa.
Pseudomonas? What was that again?
Pseudomonas aeruginosa. It's a mouthful. Anyway, there's also Staphylococcus aureus, and even certain fungi can cause problems. What makes them good at colonizing your contact lenses is their ability to form biofilms.
Biofilms, those sound vaguely menacing.
They are, in this context, biofilms are these, like, slimy fortresses that bacteria create to protect themselves. It makes them much harder to kill with your run-of-the-mill contact solution.
So they're like building little bacterial bunkers on your contacts. That's both fascinating and slightly horrifying at the same time.
Exactly. It's like a tiny microscopic war zone happening right on your eyeballs. And that's why it's not enough to just give your lenses a quick rinse with solution. You got to rub them gently to break up those biofilms.
Noted. Rub those biofilms away. Okay, so we've covered pink eye, which is common but can be trickier than it sounds, and keratitis, which is more serious and can even be linked to contact lenses. Is there anything even scarier lurking in the world of eye infections?
Unfortunately, yes. And that brings us to endophthalmitis.
Say that again?
Endophthalmitis.
Endophthalmitis. Okay, that one just sounds intimidating.
And it is intimidating. We're talking about a full-blown medical emergency here. Endophthalmitis is an infection that gets deep into the tissues and fluids inside the eyeball.
Inside. Okay, now that's officially terrifying. It's like something out of a horror movie.
It's definitely not something to mess around with. The articles mention two main types, exogenous and endogenous.
Exogenous and what was the other one?
Endogenous.
Okay. So what's the difference?
Well, exogenous is when the infection gets in from outside the eye. This often happens after an injury or surgery.
Right.
Imagine something that's carrying bacteria, like, say, a tree branch poking you in the eye.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
Exactly. And then there's endogenous endophthalmitis. This one happens when an infection already in your body spreads to your eye.
So it's like your eye can become an unwanted vacation destination for bacteria from other parts of your body?
Pretty much. And neither type of endophthalmitis is good. They're both extremely dangerous and require immediate medical attention.
Got it. Endophthalmitis. Serious, scary, see a doctor right away. No question. Okay, I think I'm ready for a slight break from the truly terrifying eye infections. What else is on the list?
Well, there's still a few more to go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about cellulitis next.
Cellulitis? Okay, that's another one I've definitely heard of, but tell me more.
So cellulitis, like a lot of the infections we've talked about today, actually comes in different forms. There's orbital cellulitis and perceptal cellulitis.
You're telling me. It seems like when it comes to eye infections, there's always more going on than meets the eye, literally.
Uh-huh, good one. Yeah, eyes are complex. But okay, back to cellulitis. So we were talking about the two main types.
Right, orbital and perceptal. What's the difference?
So orbital cellulitis is the one that can really knock you off your feet. It's a much more serious infection. It actually affects the tissues within the eye socket itself.
Ooh, that sounds painful.
Yeah, you'll definitely know if you have it. You'll have pain for sure, and swelling, and it might even be hard to move your eye.
And perceptal cellulitis? I'm guessing that one's a bit milder if it hasn't sent me running for the hills yet.
You got it. Perceptal cellulitis is more of an eyelid thing. It affects the tissue in front of the eye socket.
So less chance of losing your vision with that one, I hope.
Definitely. It's still no walk in the park, though, don't get me wrong, but it's usually much easier to treat. Usually just a course of antibiotics will do the trick. The articles I was reading mentioned it's more common in kids, actually.
Oh, interesting. Kids are always touching everything and then rubbing their eyes, so that makes sense, I guess.
Exactly. Little ones love to explore the world with their hands.
So to recap, for all the worried parents out there, if your kid's eye is red and swollen, don't just brush it off, right?
Definitely not. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Have a doctor check it out.
Makes sense. Speaking of things that can pop up around our eyes, what about those little red bumps you can get on the eyelids sometimes? Those ones that feel like you've got an eyelash growing in the wrong direction.
You're talking about styes.
Yeah, styes, that's it. I always forget what they're called.
Styes are small, but they can be mighty painful. They're actually bacterial infections too, just like some of the bigger ones we've talked about.
It always amazes me how something so tiny can cause so much discomfort. What even causes those things anyway? I've always wondered.
Well, from what I understand, it's all about those little oil glands near your eyelashes. They get blocked sometimes.
Blocked.
It could be a few different things. Sometimes dead skin cells clog them up, or sometimes it's just an overproduction of oil. Anyway, that oil backs up, creates a nice little breeding ground for bacteria, and boom, you've got yourself a red, swollen sty.
Lovely. And the warm compresses people always recommend for styes, those actually help with that.
They do. The heat helps to soften things up, so to speak. It can help promote drainage.
Huh. So there is actually some science behind those home remedies. I love it when that happens. Okay, so we've covered a lot of different infections now. Are we nearing the end of this eye-opening journey?
Almost. There's one more that we should cover. Uveitis.
Uveitis. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one. What is it?
Well, uveitis is different from a lot of the other infections we've talked about in that it affects the middle layer of the eye rather than the outer parts.
The middle layer. What's that called again?
The uvea. That's where it gets its name, uveitis.
Ah, right, the uvea. Okay, and what kind of symptoms does uveitis cause?
Well, you can have pain, for one thing, and blurred vision. And sometimes people with uveitis see floaters in their vision.
Oh, like those little cobweb-looking things. I get those sometimes when I'm tired.
Yeah, exactly. Those floaters can be caused by other things, but they're also a common symptom of uveitis.
Got it. So, uveitis, pain, blurred vision, floaters, all happening in the middle layer of the eye. And what causes it? Is it another bacterial infection?
Not necessarily. The articles I read pointed to a strong link between uveitis and autoimmune diseases. Things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, even multiple sclerosis can be underlying triggers.
Wow, really? So instead of bacteria attacking the eye, it's more like the body's own immune system turning against it.
That's exactly it. And it really highlights how interconnected our bodies are, right? Something going on in one system can manifest in seemingly unrelated ways in another.
So interesting. It makes you wonder if those autoimmune diseases can trigger uveitis. Could other things play a role too? Things like stress or diet, things like that.
It's very possible. The exact causes of a lot of autoimmune diseases are still being researched. But a lot of experts believe that factors like stress, diet, environmental toxins, those things can all play a part. They can influence the development of these diseases or trigger flare-ups.
So it's like a perfect storm situation. You've got this complex web of potential triggers, and if you're unlucky enough to be susceptible to them, bam, you end up with something like uveitis.
You got it. It's complicated.
That's definitely a lot to unpack. Maybe we can switch gears for a bit. We've talked a lot about the what of eye infections, all the different types and what causes them and all that. But I'm really curious about the so what? Like, what can we do about all of this? These articles all seem to really emphasize prevention.
Absolutely. Yeah. Prevention is huge when it comes to eye infections. It's always better to avoid them in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk prevention then.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways from the research? What do we need to be doing to keep those pesky eye infections at bay? So prevention, prevention, prevention. Where do we even start with that?
It might sound a little too simple, but one of the biggest things you can do is wash your hands. Seriously.
Hand washing. I knew you were going to say that. It's like the magic bullet for, well, pretty much everything, right?
Yeah, it really is. And it's easy to forget about hand washing when we're busy and going about our day. But think about all the things you touch. Door handles, your phone, shopping carts.
Oh, I know. And then we touch our faces, rub our eyes. It's actually kind of gross when you think about it.
Exactly. And all those surfaces are covered in germs just waiting to jump into your eye.
Okay, you've convinced me. Hand washing is a must. What else can we do to keep those pesky infections away?
Well, this one's for all the contact lens wearers out there. Cleanliness is key. Make sure you're cleaning your lenses properly. Don't sleep in them. You know the drill, right?
Absolutely. And resist the urge to share contacts, no matter how tempting it may seem.
For real. Sharing anything that comes into contact with your eyes is a big no-no, especially makeup.
Ugh, don't even get me started on sharing makeup. I remember this one time in college. Actually, never mind. It's too horrifying to repeat. Let's just say I learned my lesson about sharing mascara the hard way.
I can only imagine. Anyway, speaking of things that are bad for your eyes, the articles also mention something else we should be avoiding.
Let me guess. Smoking.
Bingo!
I mean, I know it's bad for your lungs and everything else, but it affects your eyes, too.
It does. And we're not even just talking about the immediate irritation from the smoke itself. Remember how we were talking about uveitis and its linked to autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, smoking can actually trigger those autoimmune responses.
So it's a double whammy then. The smoke irritates your eyes, and it also messes with your immune system, which makes you more susceptible to things like uveitis.
Right. And on that note, those articles also emphasize something else that's really important. Regular eye exams. And I'm not just talking about people who wear glasses or contacts. Everyone should be getting their eyes checked out by a doctor regularly.
Well, that's a good reminder. I'll be honest, I've definitely been guilty of putting those off.
It's easy to let those things slip our minds when we're busy, but those regular checkups can make a world of difference. Early detection is key. Which actually reminds me, there's one more thing that really caught my attention when I was going through these articles on eye infections.
What's that?
Well, they talked a lot about the different types of infections, the symptoms, the causes, all that. But something that wasn't really addressed all that much was the long-term effects of eye infections.
Ooh, that is interesting. I hadn't even considered that. I always assumed once the infection cleared up, you were in the clear, so to speak. But it makes you wonder.
Exactly. Does the body really return to its baseline after an infection? Or could there be subtle changes, long-term consequences that linger?
It's a fascinating question and one that we don't seem to have a clear answer to just yet. It makes you think twice about those eye infections, doesn't it?
It really does. There could be a whole other layer to this that we haven't even begun to unravel.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to leave it for today then. Food for thought, right? Or I guess I should say, food for the eyeballs.
I like it.
So, for anyone listening, if you're as intrigued by this long-term effects mystery as we are, why not do some digging of your own? There's a whole world of research out there just waiting to be explored. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to uncover those long-term secrets.
Wouldn't that be something?
It would. And on that note, we've reached the end of another deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to join us next time for another fascinating exploration into, well, who knows where our curiosity will take us next. Until then, stay curious.